see here is I've got my blanks. This is where I set it up. And I'm going to be putting my rivets on this end, which is the end that's going to be closing over the neck, which has the soft side of the Velcro on it. And we'll get to that in a second. But what you can see we're going to be using here are some rivets. And this is a particular style of rivet. This is called a double domed rivet, which means that the bottoms with the posts and the caps without the posts have the same look. Now, I used to use standard open-ended rivets, but I found, especially with the cuffs that I was making, that over time they started to get a little corroded, so they would leave sort of like, you know, rust marks everywhere. So what I've got here is my templates. Now, the other piece that I didn't mention that I cut and sewed, if I can find it, is a 5/8 inch doubled over. Same as everything else that we did, exact same process. So measure 5/8 inch, double it, fold it in half, and stitch it the same way. That's actually going to be what holds on my D-ring. So in this particular case, what I need to do is I need to find my center point, and your center point is going to be essentially invisible. And we know, because we're dealing with an 18-inch collar, that my center point is going to be 9 inches. So let me find 9 inches to my center point, which is there. And I'm just using a fine tip Sharpie just to mark it. You only need to see it for yourself. And then what I can do is I can lay out my template. So knowing where my center point is, which is right there, I put my template on there and I measure off. Now what I'm going to do is, because I've got the templates done, I'm going to add some measurements at the end of the video so everybody can see what this is, or if I can, I'll add it to the video. But now I'm just marking out where my holes need to go. And there you go. That's going to be the strap, which is this piece that I'll cut to size. I'll put 2 rivets on either side, and that's what's going to hold my D-ring on. Now again, that's 4 rivets holding the D-ring on, but it's not going to be the only thing holding the D-ring on. And on this side, you can see I've got another template set up. These templates all look like they're different sizes, and they are, because I do cuffs and collars, but the measurements wind up being the exact same on everything that I do. So when you look at this piece, I've got to find my center and measure off, because that's where my hardware is going to go. This is where the buckle is going to be attached. So now I mark where my holes are going to go for my buckle. And that's that. Now, where's my red piece? Here as well, I have my red piece, which is going to be that overstrapping I was telling you about. And I need to mark this. You can see this one's the same size. And what I'm going to do is mark these places. These rivets are actually going to be what holds it not only onto the collar, but it's actually going to be the piece that holds the buckle in. So, again, I'll get these measurements, but what this does is it saves you sort of some of the trial and error in terms of calculating the spacing for everything. But you can see all those holes. So that's where everything's going to go. So let me go ahead, turn the camera off, and get set up to start punching these holes. Okay, I just wanted to discuss the tools that we're going to be using here real quick. Obviously what I have here is just a regular sort of plastic cutting board, just a kitchen cutting board. Of course, that's just to save my desk a little. It's not just to save my desk, but it's also to save the tools. First tool we're going to be using here is actually what's called a mini punch. You can get all kinds of leather punches. This one I like because it's just a stem you hammer on, and when you buy the kit, and I think I spent about $8 on this, this was not big money, these are replaceable tips, so you can actually do multiple size holes. This is the size hole I need for my rivets, right? So you can see, same size. Good to go with the rivets. The other thing you're going to need to get, if you're going to be working with rivets, and this is a hand rivet setter. As you can see, it's just like the Mini Punch. It's basically just a stem with a cupped edge, which actually lets that rivet top, that dome rivet top, sit inside so that it doesn't go all over the place. Unfortunately, because of the way the camera's set up, I'm not going to be able to show you how everything is going to get punched out. I'll try and find a way to do that. But basically what we're going to do is take all of those markings that we did with the templates and cut everything out, punch everything. So we need to punch out the holes for our strapping to hold our D-ring on. And we need to cut the holes here for our strapping. And then we need to punch our strapping to attach the buckle and then to attach the strapping to the collar. And then we'll go from there and show you what everything looks like when we're done. Okay, so as mentioned, aside from the rivets that we discussed that you're going to need a D-ring, obviously, to attach, and you're going to need a buckle. These buckles, I get at Tandy Leather, and I always get the ones that have the ability to lock. Of course, not a lot of people, or not everybody is going to want a locking buckle, but the nice thing about it is you don't have to lock it. Just because it's got it on there doesn't mean you have to use it, and I would much rather give people the option. Unless somebody had come to me with a specific request not to have those on there, I always make them with the locking buckles simply because it's just another option. So what we're going to do is go ahead and attach our components and then see how this comes out. You can see I've got my rivets lined up here, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with these here in a second. But you'll notice, hopefully you can see, I've actually got two different lengths of rivets here, and that's because I'm actually going to be going through different layers of leather. For my middle section here, I'm only going through 2 layers of leather, so I'm going to use those short rivets for that. But on this other end, I'll show you, we're actually going to be going through 3 layers of leather, so we're going to use the longer rivets for that. For this, I need 4 of the shorter rivets. For that end, I need 2 of the longer rivets. So as you can see, I'm going to start by putting my first 2 rivets on. There's my strapping for the D-ring, and you can see with the shorter rivets, I've got just a little bit of exposure of the rivets coming through. Essentially what I want to do is put my caps on, push them down till you hear them click. See, I've got enough spacing, all that's been worked out ahead of time. And then I take that tool I was telling you about, which is the rivet setter. I've got a leather crafting hammer here, but any kind of hammer will work. The reason I like this is because it's got a nice broad face to it, so if you screw up like I tend to do, you don't really miss and whack a thumb or something. So basically what you want to do is you set the rivet setter on, and then what you want to do is you want to come down really quite sharply one time with the hammer. You don't want to be hitting this over and over again. You want to set the rivet in one hit. So I suppose I can try it with the camera and see how that works, but I'm afraid I'm going to knock it off the table. So we'll try it once and see how it goes. So there's the top of the rivet setter. Here comes my hammer. You want to come straight down and you want to do it quickly and sharply. And that's it. That's the rivet set. So we'll go ahead, we'll set the next one. And there's both of our rivets set. So now what we want to do, of course, is put our D-ring on, get our 2 other shorter rivets, and run those through the back. Now, the strap is longer than it needs to be, so that you've got a little bit of wiggle room for the rivets. If these were the same size, it would actually stretch the leather to try and get the D-ring through. But you can see we've created a nice loop here. And again, I'll get those measurements at the end that fit the D-ring without having to sort of change the pressure on either side of the leather. Basically what would happen is if you didn't do this, you'd have this part of the leather kind of bowed in the front, but it would also be bowed in the back facing against the throat, and that's not terribly comfortable. So we want to try and keep this part of the leather as flat as possible. And again, we've got some, it's fairly close, but that's the way we want them to be. So we get our rivet setter. Again, you want to do this as quickly as possible, just one straight shot down. You don't want to be messing around with this. There's one. You want to come down on the second one. And there you go. And that is your D-ring secured. But again, because of the design of this particular collar, this isn't the only thing that's going to be holding this down. So let me go and get set up for our end piece, and we'll go ahead and get that on. Okay, this is the part that can ruin your day if you're not really paying attention. So, as you can see, I've got my rivets standing up in here, right there. And those are the longer rivets, as I mentioned. So what I want to do is I want to run my buckle through, and this is why you need this big hole, because this is the piece that when it wraps around the buckle allows that tab to move. So then you can see I've got my two other holes lined up exactly the way I want them. Now, again, this is why I said you have to be very careful on this step, because you want to make sure that the buckle is facing the right direction, that everything you need is in place, because once those rivets go in, they are a pain to get out. You essentially have to drill them out. If you try popping them out, you can tear the leather and all that kind of stuff, and you don't want that. So basically what you want is, because this is going to wrap around the long way, you want this roller edge to where it's going to be coming in. So we've got our two rivets. We want to set the one piece of leather down, get this piece folded over, and then put the other through. And as I said, now you can see we've got 3 layers of leather rather than just the 2 that we had through the middle section. Let me do it this way. Through the middle section. So you need the longer rivet to get the same exposure on the edge of the rivet. So let me move this in the way here where we can see it. And again, this is why this stone is handy. It reduces the amount of kind of vibration that goes through, but it also gives you a little platform that you can hang those off of. So as you can see, I've got the buckle hanging off, and I'm all set to put my caps on my rivets. So let me get the rivet caps on there. And apparently I'm one short. So let me get the second one. So there you go. There's the 2 rivets. And once again, just for the sake of fun, we get our rivet setter, our mallet, make sure everything's squared up and straight. Hammer in the first rivet. Go on to the next one, hammer in the second rivet. And like I said, you want to try to avoid doing that, but there we go. Get that flattened out. And so we've got our 2 flat rivets, And now what you can see is we've got a perfectly functioning collar. So there we have our 16 inches, right? 18 inches with 2 inches of the Velcro overlapped. And what happens with this design is our strapping now runs around the collar, through the loop, which covers all of our riveting work here, creating a nice design, runs through the roller part of the buckle, and creates a nice snug fit. Now what I'm going to do is, when I see this person that I'm making this for, I'm actually going to put the collar on and mark the hole where the tab is going to come through. And again, I'm going to use this same 1/2 inch punch because I know that's what's going to fit in through there. So that'll make it a custom fit collar. There won't be a lot of extra holes in here. There will just be the one hole for the tab to fit that one particular person. And that is how you go ahead, out of leather, with a little bit of knowledge, a couple of easy tools, and make yourself a really functional, really comfortable, really practical collar.